Good morning, everyone. Welcome to News 4 Impact. I'm your host, Josh Benson. Got a great show for you today, and we're going to delve into technology. If you're like me, you love computers. I consider myself a computer geek, and that's what the show is all about. But if you're not into computers, this is a valuable show still because you'll understand what and what not to do with computers, and we got some surprising things to talk about. So today what we're going to focus on is computer and internet security and forensics. We actually have someone who is an expert in computer and internet forensics. So I'm going to introduce you to Scott Greene. Thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure, Josh.
Am I right in saying that? Computer forensics, that's what you do?
That's what I do. Technology forensics in general, it goes beyond computers because there's technology and computers are now built into everything. So from cell phones to cars, that technology has a computer in it, and a lot of those pieces of technology have records of where they've been or what they've done.
So when I think of forensics, I think right away crime. I think of trying to piece together a crime scene. Essentially, would that work in with and what I would think that you do is go into computers to find some details about solving a crime, maybe in an instance?
Yep, absolutely. Crimes are committed with computers all the time. People are whether they're hacking into another computer system or they're stalking somebody via computer. There are all kinds of things that happen with computers these days that are needed to be analyzed. Even drug dealers keep track sometimes of their records in computers, and we extract that information to help determine what happened and when.
I have some good information from you, and I found a quote that you have from George Orwell. Who controls the past commands the future, and who commands the future conquers the past. What does that mean to you?
It means that he was a bright man. That's what it really means. George Orwell is just one of my favorite guys. It just means that that you need to understand both the past and the future. And as we move forward with technology, it's important for all of us to understand how technology impacts our lives, but also what trail we leave with technology as we move through our daily lives.
Well, I want to kind of focus on computers today because a lot of our viewers have used computers or currently use computers, and it's day to day it's becoming so popular as it was 5, even 10 years ago. Email, for instance, is something I use every day, constantly, and maybe too much, and some people out there probably use it a lot as well. So when we talk about computer forensics, what specifically are we talking about? Is it all-encompassing, email, the computer hard drive itself? What is it?
Usually in computer forensics, what we do is we extract the hard drive out of the machine. We use special technology to take everything that's on that hard drive and put it on usually another hard drive that we will then analyze the data that's on that hard drive. Email is a big smoking gun. People say things in email they would not say anywhere else. They think it's private, they think it's anonymous, and it's not. People store their accounting records and things like that on their computer systems, and sometimes we analyze that. I do some other cases where we actually analyze the databases that people have for their company records, who they talk to, what kind of transactions they do with their customers and with their employees. Things like that are all stored, and all those transactions are on computers. In addition, we also look at things like documents, Excel spreadsheets. People want to sometimes encrypt their documents. They'll put a password on their document, or they'll put the password on their spreadsheet, and we actually can break that and show what's in that spreadsheet and what's in those documents.
So are you considered a hacker then?
I'm a white hat hacker.
A white hat hacker, and that's right. Something. And there's the black hat hacker,
correct?
Which is the evil ones.
The guys who are breaking in for the sport of it, or to do some sort of injustice to somebody for something. Yeah.
I remember 10 years ago when I sat down to really learn computers, I tried to learn a little bit about being a hacker. Got through the first chapter, and I said, forget it. You got to know so much stuff. So this is a constant learning process for you.
It's a constant learning process because technology is changing all the time. We were looking at some technology the other day that actually does really, really well with cell phones. There's a lot of people who now have, whether it's Palm Trios or Blackberries or any kind of smartphones out there, will have a tremendous trail of not only the text messages and the phone calls, but also in some cases where people have been in the city, or where people have been on the planet with their cell phone.
So now there's some misconceptions, and you had mentioned one, that people assume their emails are safe. With computers and technology in general, what are some of the misconceptions that people have? Did they think they're safe all the time? Is that what you're finding?
Well, people believe that they're anonymous on the internet more than anything.
Okay.
That when they send an email to somebody or they go to a website, that the person who owns that website doesn't have any information about who they are or where they're from and things like that. And that's not really true. People who own websites, people who do that type of analysis, whether it's Google or other companies, are actually tracking and collecting a tremendous amount of information about a person. They may not know that person's name, although that can be found as well in some cases, but they can track a tremendous amount about a person's identity, what they buy, how often they buy, things like that when they browse internet websites. Email itself tends to be something that people believe that they can send an email and that it's private between two people. Generally speaking, when somebody sends an email, it's probably on 4 different machines at a minimum. If it's on their machine, it's on their internet service provider's machine, it's on the destination's internet service provider's machine, and it's on the recipient's machine.
Okay.
And so it can be on 4 machines, and they believe that if they just delete it, that it's gone. And that's not the case. Usually it's somewhere, it can be on those other machines even just temporarily, or it can be on some of those machines for a longer period of time.
And I do want to touch on that throughout the show, if you can give us some tips on how to be safer when we're using the internet, when we're using our computers. And that was one of my questions. If you simply delete a file on your PC or your Mac desktop and it goes in the trash bin and you empty it, is that file gone forever?
That file is not gone, and what happens is it takes time for the operating system to actually overwrite that file on the hard drive.
Okay.
And as time goes on, it will eventually be overwritten.
Okay.
But we've seen a lot of cases where people get rid of machines. They will donate a machine, for instance, and it will have their accounting records on it. It will have their life history on it, pictures of their family, things like that. And some of those are kind of benign, but when you get into somebody's financial records, it could be Quicken or QuickBooks. Sometimes those things have checking account numbers on them. They'll have Social Security numbers on them. That kind of data needs to be completely erased. And there's some great programs out there that will do that. There are programs that will actually wipe out what's on the hard drive and prevent somebody else from actually accessing that data.
So you also run a company, Great Scott Enterprises Incorporated.
Great Scott Enterprises Incorporated.
And underneath that, Evidence Solutions is another kind of underneath the umbrella, one of your services.
Right. Evidence Solutions was when Great Scott Enterprises has now been around for over 25 years here in Tucson, doing computer and technology services of all kinds, including computer forensics and technology forensics. And what we decided to do is take that technology forensics piece and put it into its own separate entity. And so Evidence Solutions was the offshoot out of Great Scott Enterprises that holds that company and does those services.
And one of your specialties is data recovery, right?
We also do data recovery, right? When people forget to back up their hard drives, which is common, then we can do some data recovery for them and hopefully get their data back.
And like our example with the trashed files, and you say they're not quite gone, do you see customers or clients come in and say, well, this is something I deleted and I really need to have it back? Can that be recovered?
Frequently we can recover all kinds of data that's been deleted on the hard drive, and it just depends upon how long ago it was deleted. It's all a time it's a time frame that is important in determining how and how much we can recover. There's also those people who, a hard drive is a mechanical device. When a hard drive fails, you can no longer have access to the data that's on that hard drive. And so the other thing that we do is we can take and extract data off of hard drives that have failed.
Wow. So you use these specialties with your forensics. Who are some of the people in the organizations who need this professional forensic service?
We do some government work.
Okay.
But more often than not, we do work for attorneys in court cases. We also do work for individuals, and we also do a lot of work now for insurance companies. Insurance companies are looking into fraud. They're preventing or helping to look at where people spent money, where people did things on on the computer systems in their office, in an accounting system, those kinds of things, and they're looking at those types of situations to determine if somebody committed fraud. Insurance fraud is very rampant in this country, and insurance companies are using computer forensic and technology experts to determine what went on computers.
And I can honestly say it must not be a common practice for what you do, because computers aren't necessarily that old of a technology. Is it a market where there's a lot of professionals like yourself that do this, or is it something that during a court case, a lawyer brings you in to prove a point, and people are blown away because they didn't know this was available?
There's a lot of people who claim to be able to do this. The difference between them and myself is experience.
Okay.
I've actually been doing this now for 15 years. The ability to look at data and say something's amiss here is actually key. There's the science of it, which is to merely take apart a hard drive and tell you what's on that hard drive. And then there's the art, which is to look at it and say something's wrong. And what's wrong, and why is it wrong? And okay, that file doesn't actually belong here. I did a source code copyright case where somebody had written a piece of software, and we were examining the hard drive, and they claimed that they had never looked at this original piece of software, that they didn't copy it, they didn't use it to write their own software system and things like that. And what I ended up finding, back to the art piece, is I found a piece from the original software which happened to be mixed in with their software. And so that was clear evidence that they actually had written their software based upon this other piece of software.
So it just magically lined up.
It all came together.
What kind of process is that, and how a time frame for something for you to discover that?
In that case, I think we spent probably on the order of 30 or 40 hours before we actually came across that data. We had several hard drives. It was a networked computer system, so we had to look at multiple computer systems to determine what had happened and how it happened. And there was some CD evidence. We brought in a whole network of computers from Utah and looked at those to really determine what happened.
So you just excel in understanding code and how it works, essentially. Is that kind of what you do, or how do you go about finding this information?
Well, there are specialized pieces of software out there that will analyze and extract information.
Okay.
But then the other part of that is to know which piece of software to use at which time.
Sure.
There are special software that do really, really well with analyzing email. There's other software that does really well with analyzing databases and accounting systems.
Okay.
The other thing that Great Scott Enterprises has going for it is that I have a staff of programmers. So if I need something custom done, then we can actually write a piece of software that will extract certain types of data. And my background is programming as well, so I have the ability to look at code and look at data and make some determination as to what it is and where it came from.
So when this goes to court and you get brought in to do your service, is it much of a legal issue in itself in terms of kind of federal guidelines on how this all works?
There are federal guidelines on what can be collected.
Okay.
And federal guidelines on how it should be presented and how it needs to be preserved, because technology data, computer data is transient. If it could be easily deleted or overwritten, as we discussed earlier. You can buy software that will overwrite what's on a hard drive. And so it needs to be preserved, and that information and how that information is preserved is key. And so there are guidelines from the federal government as to how that should be preserved and how it should be presented and things like that. But because technology is changing, those guidelines are constantly changing as well. There are new pieces of recommendations as to how that needs to be. Cell phones, for instance.
Yep.
A new cell phone comes out all the time. How do we preserve that data? How do we prove that that data came from that cell phone? Things like that are real key.
And I'm assuming you have to stay up on that constantly in order to be good at what you do.
I spend a lot of time researching and studying new pieces of technology and how they work.
And do a lot of the cases that you assist in hold up in court and find a job? Okay, good news for you then. So it all works out seemingly in the end. And you have a couple examples for us. Hopefully we can get into those after the break. We're going to take a break in a couple seconds. But I want you to check out the websites. There are two different websites you have, and one is great-scott.com, right?
Right, and that's for the technology company, and that is where we will service computers and technology and maintain networks and things like that. And that company is the company that's been around for over 25 years.
Okay. And the other is evidencesolutions.com. Tell us about that.
And Evidence Solutions is where we do the technology forensics. That company is recently spun out from Great Scott Enterprises, and just to make that a unique business and give it some identity, Great Scott Enterprises as itself does, and everybody thinks of it as a technology and assistance company for doing networks and software, and Evidence Solutions' specialty is actually to do the computer forensics and technology forensics.
So do you have companies knocking on your door every day looking for help?
I get companies and I get individuals and I get attorneys, and business is good.
Wow. Good stuff. It's fascinating. I can't even believe half the stuff that you would probably know, but we're going to pick your brain some more. But right now we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a couple minutes with more from Scott Greene. Stick around. And welcome back to News 4 Impact. I'm your host, Josh Benson. We've got a cool show for you today. We're focusing on technology forensics. And if you're a computer user like myself, you must love how they work. You put in a lot of information, you get a lot of information back. But what we're focusing on today is that information and how it can be vulnerable if you're not careful, and you can actually have some bad things happen if you're not careful with your computer. So joining us now is Scott Greene. He is an expert at technology forensics, specifically computers. That's kind of what we're focusing on today. So thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
And I'm going to call you a hacker today because I think that's what you are. Is that right?
Well, I'm a white hat hacker. I do it for a profession, and I get paid for it.
So you're a good hacker. There are the good and the bad hackers.
Right.
And I want to talk a little bit about hackers coming up, but I kind of want to put you on the spot here. If I were in my newsroom right now at my desk and I just disappeared and you took my computer home and looked at it, what are some of the things you could find out about me?
I could find out perhaps where you did banking.
Okay.
I could find out if you do any online banking. I could find out every place that you've been recently on the internet. A lot of the pages that you've looked at on the internet would be preserved on your local machine, because when you display things in your web browser, that's Internet Explorer, and you browse the internet, that data actually comes down to your computer before it gets displayed. So we can see what you've looked at on the internet. And then there's an email trail. Everybody you've sent emails to recently, emails that have been deleted and haven't been wiped out yet are still on that machine. And then, of course, the inbound email, who you received email from and how often and things like that. Newer computer systems may have, perhaps that's one of the things that this company has, that News 4 has, is a fax system that is computerized. Your faxes may be on there as well, and copies of your faxes. And so there are things that you leave an electronic trail everywhere you go, and on your computer, it could be a tremendous amount of information.
But I have passwords on that. Does that matter to you?
No.
You can work around the password.
I can get past passwords all day. I do it all day long.
How does that make you feel at home? People can get around your passwords. Well, that's a good point. Passwords are important. And I learned something, a valuable lesson on one of my personal email accounts. The email server that held the account, our password was very weak, and somebody got into it, and it started spamming out, and we got blocked. So basically, I couldn't send emails from my personal email address. So the importance of passwords and how to come up with a clever enough password so somebody like yourself can't get around it.
Okay. Passwords, the longer the password, the better. Passwords should contain letters and numbers, or letters and numbers and symbols. The longer it is, the harder it is for somebody to crack and get control of an email account or a computer system or access online banking and things like that. You want it to be rememberable, but you can make words out of symbols if you try. But the most important part is that it's complicated, letters, symbols, and numbers, and long, not just my dog's name, where somebody is going to come up with that, or your last name, or your first and last name. Things like that are too short, too easily guessable, and so the more complicated you can make it, the safer it will be.
Now, when you talked about the banking example, for instance, on my computer, now I have a password to my banking software online, and I'm assuming they have the security to protect that. Is that the case?
Banks are in the industry of keeping that information safe,
and
they do very well. They're not perfect, but they do very, very well with that. In fact, I had a call just yesterday from a guy who was telling me that he did some online transactions, and he was thoroughly convinced that when he did these online transactions that somebody stole his credit card information when he did these 2 online transactions. And so I went to the websites that he was talking about, and there were 2 different transactions that he did on 2 different websites, and I looked at those websites, and they're secure websites. So I was convinced that he probably didn't lose his credit card information doing those 2 transactions. And I asked him, I said, do you use your credit card anywhere else? He says, oh yeah, I use my credit card all over town. It's more likely that somebody is going to steal your credit card while you're doing a transaction in a store than doing a transaction online when it's a secure website.
So he's just a little paranoid, probably.
He was.
He got picked up at some point. Well, who are the people that, we run into trouble with computers because there are some bad people out there, some bad hackers. Who are some of the people that actually do this thing? They break into the computers. I know hackers are one of them, spies, terrorists. We see all kinds of examples. Well,
interestingly enough, employees
okay.
of companies are some of the biggest threats going because they want to see what the CEO of the company makes. So they want to see what their associates make in payroll and things like that. And then there are those who are disgruntled employees who are either getting ready to leave and they will take trade secrets with them, they'll collect that data and then sell it when they leave, or they get terminated and they're mad, and so they want to take it out against the company who actually they were working for. And so those are some of the people also who will commit those types of crimes and either try to break into a system. It's important when you terminate an employee that you take away all their computer rights, for instance. Companies out there now will leave those login names and passwords live, and they forget to turn them off. And so it's important to work with your technology company or work with your internal IT people to actually turn those people off when you terminate somebody or when somebody quits.
And if you get caught doing this, it's some stiff penalty too, isn't it?
There are some really stiff penalties now for breaking into computer systems and for damaging computer systems. Absolutely.
We do have an example of this from a few weeks ago in the news where a Briton accused of the biggest computer hack of all time, that's what they're quoting, sent to the U.S., extradited back to the U.S., could face life behind bars. Now this man is Gary McKinnon. He was hacking into government computer networks, most of them operated by the military, in the months after the attacks on September 11th. So he claims it was just he wanted to find information on UFOs, but clearly this is a man who knows what he's doing.
If he was searching for information on UFOs, I'd be surprised, just because it doesn't seem like somebody with that kind of intelligence and ability would be searching just for that type of information.
And they're talking could be life sentence behind bars, so this is very serious. If, granted, you have to have the knowledge to be able to do something that man did, but...
And if he's convicted, sure, but it is serious crimes, especially when you get into government computers. But when you cause damage to anybody's computer, it's a crime. And simply even just using somebody's network can be a crime.
Okay. So that's the highest level of what happens. Let's bring it down to more basic level that people like me are at. And let's talk about like viruses. Basic home networks, basic viruses, things that people deal with every day. I know spam has become a huge issue for people in average homes that have basic computers. They get their inbox flooded with spam. What is the technology happening behind that? Why are they getting the spam, and how do they get rid of it?
Well, the best way to get rid of it is to use a good spam filter. And spam filters nowadays for corporations are outside of the system. Spam filters for people in their homes and their own personal email accounts are usually inside. You get it from the internet service provider, those people who provide your internet connection. Some of those people will provide spam filtering. And spam can be dangerous because spam can have viruses on it. But the reason why spam is so prevalent is that it's so easy to send out millions of emails and hope that you get a 1 or 2% answer rate.
Right.
And so millions can cost you pennies, and why not? Somebody might decide to buy a new sponge for their sink in the kitchen or whatever there is that people are selling.
Easy marketing.
It's easy marketing, and it's cheap. And so that's why spam is so prevalent. The government passed the canned spam Act a couple years ago, I don't think that's had a tremendous impact on the amount of spam, nor has it brought it down yet.
How about in terms of firewalls? Is that, I mean, that's something your ISP can do for you, but you can also do it basically on your own computer.
And you should do it on your own computer. If you're using the Windows operating system, everything beyond XP, actually XP and Vista both have firewalls built in. If you're using an older operating system, an older Windows operating system, then you can download free firewalls off the internet, look around to see which ones are well rated, do a little searching, and you'll find that there are firewalls out there that you can use for free. If you have a router at home, if you're connected to the internet and then you use that a router to connect multiple computers, then those will also have firewalls built into them, and those are usually on by default.
Okay.
If you get a connection from somebody like Quest, the DSL modems then also have firewalls built into them.
So what are some of the things now, and people using the computers every day, what are some of the things that they can do to help protect themselves? We're talking about a few, but when it comes to, we talked a little bit about passwords, but when they're at work, just extra steps, layers of security, because identity theft is becoming pretty prevalent all over the place.
Identity theft is becoming more common, for sure. When people use their computer systems, they should be careful about where they go and what things they do with their email. One of the things that comes in, we talked about spam, but another thing that comes in is phishing. And what phishing is, and that's spelled with a PH for phishing, phishing is you'll get an email that will look like it came from Citibank or it came from your local credit union, and it looks real. And when you look at that email and you look at how it looks, they're asking you to click and confirm your account will be closed, your account will be locked. And of course people panic at that point. They don't want their bank account locked, and it's entirely possible they may have a bank account with that institution.
All right. We could talk about this all day, but we got to go. We're running out of time. So I'm sorry to cut you off there, but I want to thank you again for being with us. Scott Greene, he is an expert in computer and technology forensics. You had a lot of work to do, it seems like.
I do indeed.
Knocking on your door. Thanks for being with us.
My
We'll
pleasure.
see you guys next week.